Imagine for a second that you are like standing in a really crowded, smoke-filled demonstration tent.
Okay.
It's the middle of summer in the early 1910s. The air in here is just, it's thick, it's hazy, and there is this distinct, acrid hiss and crackle of a toxic fire burning right in the center of the space.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's suffocating. It's the kind of environment where human lungs just, physically begin to shut down.
Right.
And yet there's a showman standing right in front of you.
Just in the smoke.
Well, near it.
Yeah.
He is this confident white man projecting his voice over the crackle of the fire all the way to the back row. And he's telling you and the rest of this sweating crowd that he has invented an absolute miracle.
A literal lifesaver.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He calls it a safety hood, basically an early breathing device. And to prove that it works, to prove that it can literally separate life from death, he's about to send his assistant directly into that hissing, toxic smoke.
I mean, it is the ultimate theatrical pitch, right?
Yeah.
The stakes just couldn't be higher.
No, totally.
You have the visceral danger of the fire right there. You've got the bold claims of the inventor and the dramatic tension of seeing if this weird, canvas hood will actually keep a human being alive in a completely unbreathable atmosphere.
Right. So you watch as the assistant steps forward, and he's been standing really quietly to the side this whole time.
Okay.
He's wearing this canvas hood entirely over his head with a long tube trailing down to the floor. And he is dressed in a very specific, elaborate costume, one that is clearly meant to suggest to the audience that he is a Native American man, like possibly a chief.
Right, playing the character?
Exactly. So the showman gives the signal, and this quiet assistant walks straight into the poison.
And just stands there.
He just stands there in the smoke, and he breathes, and, he survives.
Unbelievable.
The crowd naturally goes absolutely wild. The showman bows, taking all the credit, passing out order forms left and right. But here is the reveal.
Yeah, the big twist.
The loud, confident man doing the talking.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't invent a single thread of that device. He is literally just a hired actor. The man in the mask, the quiet assistant standing in the smoke, that is the actual inventor.
Under the disguise.
Right. His name is Garrett Morgan. He is a black inventor, a brilliant engineer and businessman, and he's testing his own life-saving device on himself while hiding his true identity.
It's when you look at the historical documents we have on Morgan's life, this moment in the tent just encapsulates everything.
It really does.
Because we aren't just looking at an under-recognized inventor here. We're looking at a man who was forced by the specific structural unfairness of his era to literally erase his own identity from his work.
Yeah.
He had to physically disguise himself as a sheer survival strategy just to be allowed to sell a machine that saved lives.
Which is exactly what we are unpacking in our deep dive today, the staggering true story of Garrett Morgan.
The heavy one.
It is, because this is a man who built a device that would eventually save dozens of lives in a horrifying, chaotic disaster beneath Lake Erie. But before he could save those lives, he had to navigate a society that was entirely unwilling to accept his brilliance simply because of the color of his skin.
Right. What's fascinating here is that the device itself, the safety hood, it never had a credibility problem.
It worked.
It worked flawlessly. It was the societal environment of early 20th century America that was broken. The market actively worked against its own safety.
So before we can even begin to understand why Morgan's eventual rescue beneath Lake Erie was so, unbelievable, we have to understand who he was.
I have to know where this mind came from.
Exactly. Because Garrett Morgan was not just some amateur tinkerer who got lucky one afternoon in his shed.
Not at all.
He was born in 1877 in Paris, Kentucky. And the context of that date and location is it's everything, right?
It really is. I mean, 1877 is the tail end of the Reconstruction era. He was born to parents who had been enslaved. So this is a period of immense upheaval, systemic disenfranchisement, and just deep poverty for Black Americans in the South.
Yeah.
The resources available to a young Black boy in Kentucky at that time were practically non-existent. Formal education was incredibly limited.
But he doesn't stay there like so many. During that era, he eventually moves north, right?
Yep.
He lands in Cleveland, Ohio as a young man looking for opportunity. And he starts working as a sewing machine repairman.
Which is such a crucial detail.
It is, but I have to stop here because, well, sewing machine repairman sounds kind of quaint to our modern ears.
Sure.
But I imagine fixing those machines back then wasn't just like swapping out a battery. What makes a late 19th century sewing machine so hard to fix?
Oh, they were phenomenally complex.
Really?
Yeah, think about what a sewing machine actually does. It has
Yeah.
to perfectly synchronize multiple moving parts at incredibly high speed.
Right.
You have the needle driving the top thread down, and then underneath the fabric, you have this rotating hook or a shuttle mechanism that has to catch that exact loop of thread to form a lock stitch with the bobbin.
Oh, wow.
And it does this all in a fraction of a second. If the timing is off by literally a millimeter, the needle shatters or the whole thing jams.
So it's not just tightening a few loose screws, it's precision engineering.
Exactly. It involved precise tension mechanisms, interlocking gears, heavy cast iron flywheels. So by working as a repairman, Morgan was basically giving himself a master class in mechanical engineering and physics.
That makes so much sense.
When you repair complex machinery, you don't just learn how it works, you learn how and why it fails. You see the stress points. You understand the physical reality of how parts move and how friction operates.
It feels a lot like a modern tech founder starting out by reverse engineering hardware in a garage.
Yes, perfect analogy.
You know, taking apart the motherboard to see how the circuits actually connect. That hands-on mechanical beginning trains his brain to see practical solutions to physical problems.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't just mechanical problem solving either. The sources tell us that Morgan actually developed an early hair straightening chemical product.
Yes, he did.
Hmm.
And the origin of that chemical product is just a perfect example of how his observational skills worked across totally different disciplines.
How so?
Well, he didn't set out to invent cosmetics. He was experimenting with chemical lubricants for his sewing machines.
Wait, hold on. Why do sewing machines need chemical lubricants? Don't you just use regular oil?
Usually, yeah.
Yeah.
But Morgan had worked his way up from repairing machines to running his own tailoring and dressmaking business.
Okay.
And in high-speed industrial-style sewing, particularly with certain thick or synthetic blend fabrics of the era, the friction of the needle moving up and down hundreds of times a minute would generate immense heat.
Oh, I see where this is going.
The needle would get so hot, it would actually scorch the fabric.
Oh, wow. Which just ruins the garment.
Exactly.
You're trying to work fast to make a profit, and the machine literally burns your product.
Right. So Morgan is in his workshop trying to formulate a liquid chemical solution that can coat the needle, reduce the friction, and prevent the scorching. So during these experiments, he tests a specific alkaline chemical mixture. And he notices something entirely unrelated to the metal needle.
What was it?
When this chemical wiped onto the woolen fibers of the fabric or hair, it altered their physical structure. It
What?
straightened them.
Okay, wait. How does a chemical lubricant straighten hair or wool? Like, what is physically happening there?
It comes down to the chemistry of keratin.
Keratin, right?
Yeah, hair and wool are largely made up of keratin proteins.
Yeah.
And the shape of those proteins, whether they're curly, wavy, or straight, is determined by disulfide bonds.
Okay, I'm with you.
These are strong chemical bonds holding the protein structures together. Morgan's alkaline solution was essentially breaking those disulfide bonds. Once the bonds are broken, the hair just relaxes and straightens out.
That is wild. He accidentally invents a chemical relaxer while trying to cool down a piece of metal.
Yeah.
But the genius isn't the accident, right? It's the fact that he recognized what he was looking at.
Exactly. A lesser mind might have just wiped up the spill, muttered about the ruined wool, and gone back to looking at the needle.
Right. But he recognized the chemical reaction and immediately saw its potential application in a completely different, highly lucrative market.
Personal care.
Yeah. And there's actually a wonderful historical anecdote from the sources that before he tested it on humans, he tested the solution on an Airedale Terrier,
A dog.
a dog known for its incredibly wiry curly coat. The chemical straightened the dog's fur so effectively that the owner supposedly didn't even recognize their own pet.
I love that detail. It's the classic accidental genius moment. But it requires the prepared mind to see the accident and say, wait, this is a product.
Yeah, exactly. He commercializes it, it becomes hugely successful, and it gives him the financial independence to focus on larger engineering problems.
Which brings us to one of his most famous everyday contributions.
Right. Garrett Morgan patented an improved three-position traffic signal.
This is a monumental piece of civic engineering.
It is.
Now, we should clarify, based on the historical context, Morgan did not invent the concept of the traffic light out of thin air.
Right. Mandatory caveat there.
Yeah, the early 20th century was a chaotic time for urban transportation, and multiple inventors were tinkering with traffic control. But Morgan's specific patented contribution was introducing the formal caution interval between the stop-and-go signals.
The yellow light.
In modern terms, yes, he laid the conceptual foundation for the yellow light.
Let's paint a picture of why this was so desperately needed, because I think we take intersections for granted today. What did a busy intersection in Cleveland actually look like in, say, 1914?
Oh, it was pure
It's
chaos.
just a free-for-all.
Pretty much. You didn't have standardized lanes, painted crosswalks, or uniform rules of the road.
Right.
You had this chaotic mix of technologies operating at completely different speeds. You had horse-drawn wagons carrying heavy freight. You had electric streetcars confined to tracks, pedestrians crossing wherever they pleased,
Sounds like a nightmare.
and a rapidly increasing number of early automobiles like the Model T, which were loud, fast, and driven by people who essentially had no formal driver's training.
And the traffic signals they did have at the time were essentially just binary switches, right?
Just stop and go.
Usually operated by a police officer blowing a whistle or turning a sign.
Precisely. And that binary system ignores the fundamental laws of physics, specifically kinetic energy and momentum.
Walk me through that. If I'm driving an early car and the signal just flips instantly from go to stop, what physically happens?
Well, a vehicle or even a heavy horse-drawn carriage cannot go from a state of velocity to a state of rest instantaneously.
Right, you can't just freeze.
Exactly. If the signal instantly switches to stop, the driver has to slam on the mechanical brakes. If they're going too fast, their momentum just carries them forward directly into the intersection.
Right, where the cross traffic has just been told to go.
Exactly. Or the person behind them doesn't react fast enough and rear-ends them. It is a system destined for collisions because it provides absolutely no buffer for deceleration.
Morgan looks at this chaos, he looks at the physics of it, and he engineers a buffer.
He does.
He creates this T-shaped pole with mechanical arms that not only said stop and go, but had a third position that essentially stopped traffic in all directions simultaneously before allowing the cross traffic to proceed.
Yes, his inclusion of that third position acknowledges reality. It gives the human operator time to process the changing command, and it gives the physical machine the distance it needs to decelerate safely. He engineered a way to manage the flow of kinetic energy. It's really a masterclass in human-centered design.
He engineered a breath, like a literal pause in the chaos to keep people safe.
That's a great way to put it.
And I think that focus on physical safety, on preserving human life against the hazards of the modern industrial world, is the perfect way to understand the invention at the absolute center of our deep dive today.
The safety hood.
Right. Morgan developed and patented an early gas mask designed to provide breathable air in hazardous, toxic atmospheres.
Indeed.
So, put us in the mindset of a firefighter or a mine worker in the early 1910s. Industrialization is exploding. We have massive factories, deep underground mines, booming cities built largely of wood and early synthetics.
A recipe for disaster.
Yeah. If a fire broke out in a basement or a mine filled with gas, what was the standard rescue protocol?
The safety protocols of the era were woefully, tragically inadequate.
Really?
Yeah, often if firefighters had to enter a smoke-filled building, their primary technology was just tying a wet rag or a sponge over their mouth and nose and staying low to the ground.
A wet rag against industrial chemical smoke.
I know.
That is terrifying.
It was a death sentence in many cases. There was some early cumbersome breathing apparatuses, like the Draeger helmets, but they were heavy, expensive, really complicated, and they often failed.
So people were just dying.
Firefighters and mine rescue teams were suffering horrific casualties because there was no reliable, lightweight, portable technology to provide them with clean air.
Wow.
Morgan saw this gap. He saw men dying, and he set out to build a practical solution.
Okay, so let's break down the mechanics of a safety hood, because when I first pictured it, I just imagined like a canvas bag over the head.
Right.
But you can't just breathe through a potato sack and survive a toxic fire. How did his invention actually filter the poison?
The genius of Morgan's design wasn't just in filtering. It was in understanding the behavior of gases and convection currents during a fire.
Okay.
Morgan knew that heat and the most toxic, dense smoke rapidly rise to the ceiling.
Right, hot air expands and goes up.
Exactly. Conversely, a layer of cooler, much more breathable air often remains right along the floor. Morgan's safety hood was a canvas piece that fit snugly over the head, but its most critical feature was a long canvas tube that trailed all the way down to the ground.
Oh. So it's essentially a snorkel, but instead of reaching up to the surface of the water, it's reaching down to the floor of the room to pull the clean air.
Precisely. And inside the opening of that trailing tube, Morgan placed a damp sponge.
Okay, what does the sponge do?
It served a dual purpose. It filtered out the larger particulate matter, the actual soot and ash, and the moisture helped cool the air as it was inhaled.
So it stops your lungs from burning.
Yes, preventing the user's lungs from being scorched by ambient heat. He also engineered a separate exhaust valve to release the carbon dioxide when the wearer exhaled, preventing them from suffocating on their own breath inside the hood.
That is incredibly elegant.
It really is.
He uses the natural physics of a fire, the convection currents to his advantage. He gets the patent. He builds the working prototype. He tests it, likely in exactly the kind of smoke-filled tents we talked about at the beginning.
And it works.
It works. So let's look at the logical next step. If you or I invent a device that literally prevents public servants from suffocating to death, we take it to market, we get celebrated as heroes, right?
I think so.
We secure municipal contracts nationwide. But this is where the story hits a wall. This is the collision between undeniable, brilliant innovation and the pervasive, deeply entrenched racial discrimination of Jim Crow America.
This is the crux of the tragedy.
Yeah.
The historical record shows that when Morgan attempted to market his safety hood, particularly across the American South, but certainly in northern cities as well, he encountered a massive structural barrier.
Which was?
He found that openly advertising this life-saving device and the invention of a black businessman significantly hurt his sales.
I have to stop and really think about the psychology of that because it is just completely irrational.
And defies logic.
Imagine you are a fire chief in a major city. You have watched your own men get pulled out of burning buildings, coughing up black soot, their lungs ruined. A salesman walks into your office and offers you a lightweight, proven tool that will prevent your men from dying. Are you really going to reject it, or are you going to send that salesman away just because the inventor is black?
It is deeply difficult for a modern mind to comprehend the sheer, self-destructive depth of that prejudice. But the historical documents confirm this was the reality.
It's madness.
We are not talking about a vague difficulty of the era. This was a concrete commercial freeze-out. The prejudice of the buyers, their absolute commitment to maintaining a racial hierarchy, completely outweighed their desire for safety, efficiency, or even the survival of their own employees.
They were willing to sacrifice human lives, their own firefighters, just to uphold this horrific status quo. It's the definition of cutting off your nose to spite your face, but with fatal consequences.
Exactly.
Why? Was it just pure spite?
It was about the fragility of the dominant societal narrative. The prevailing system of white supremacy relied on the false, heavily promoted premise that black Americans were not capable of elite intellectual, scientific, or engineering achievement.
Okay, I see.
If a white fire chief or a wealthy mine owner purchased a complex, life-saving technological device from Garrett Morgan, they would be tacitly acknowledging his genius.
Right.
They would be holding physical proof in their hands that a black man had engineered a solution superior to anything the white market had produced.
And their worldview was so brittle that they would rather risk death than admit a black man was smarter than them.
Exactly. Many buyers simply refuse to make that admission, even at the cost of human life.
So what does a brilliant, practical, problem-solving inventor do when faced with an utterly irrational, lethal market?
He adapts.
He does what he always does. He engineers a workaround. Just like he engineered a third light to manage the kinetic energy of a Model T, he engineered a strategy to bypass the racial barrier.
He built a disguise.
His response to this was to literally build a disguise. This brings us right back to the scene from our cold open.
Right, the tip.
Morgan orchestrated a highly theatrical marketing campaign. He formed the National Safety Device Company, and he hired a white actor to travel around and publicly present as the inventor or the chief executive of the company.
While Morgan hid in plain sight.
Meanwhile, Morgan himself disguised his identity to perform the actual dangerous demonstrations. And the disguise was elaborate.
It was.
The sources indicate he sometimes dressed as a Native American man, adopting the persona of a chief mason, acting as the silent, stoic assistant to the white actor.
We have to analyze this disguise carefully. It's easy to view it as an eccentricity or a quirky bit of historical theater.
Sure.
But it was a deeply rational, pragmatic adaptation to an entirely irrational market.
It was a business strategy.
Morgan was an entrepreneur. He knew his product worked. He knew with absolute certainty it could save lives. If the only way to get this technology into the hands of the people burning to death was to play along with the buyer's racial delusions, he did it.
But the psychological toll of that, I want you, the listener, to really sit with this. Imagine building the greatest achievement of your professional life.
Yeah.
Something you poured your intellect, your late nights, your personal capital into. Something undeniably good for the world. And then, when it's time to show it to the public, you have to stand silently in the corner. You put on a costume. You use a fake name.
That's heartbreaking.
And you watch someone else, an actor who probably doesn't even fully understand the convection currents or the exhaust valves, take all the credit. He takes the applause. He shakes hands with the mayor while you just stand there breathing in the smoke.
Right.
You do all of this just so your work can survive.
It is a profound form of erasure, self-inflicted out of sheer necessity. It highlights a tragic paradox in Morgan's life.
What's the paradox?
He invented a physical device designed to protect people from toxic environments. But to sell it, he had to invent a second device, this elaborate disguise, this theatrical ruse to protect his invention from the toxic social environment of early 20th century America.
Wow.
The actor and the costume were as much a part of the survival mechanism as the canvas hood and the trailing air tubes.
The disguise was the only way to bypass the toxicity of the culture. And he navigated it. He sold the hood. Slowly but surely, municipal departments bought them.
They did.
But then we reached the pivot point in history. We moved from the controlled, theatrical environment of a marketing demonstration in a tent into a chaotic, lethal, unscripted emergency.
The ultimate test.
The device that had been sold in secret was about to be tested in full public view with massive stakes. We are moving to July of 1916. The setting is Cleveland, Ohio.
July 24th, 1916, to be exact.
Let's set the scene for the listener because the engineering of this disaster is terrifying all on its own. Cleveland is booming. It's a massive industrial hub, and the city desperately needs fresh water for its growing population and its factories.
Right.
So they are undertaking a massive infrastructure project, drilling a new waterworks tunnel deep beneath Lake Erie.
The scale of this project is just daunting. We're talking about crews of men often called sandhogs, working inside a tunnel that is roughly 250 feet below the surface of the lake.
That is so deep.
And extending miles out from the shore.
Just picture the claustrophobia of that. You are in a damp, narrow concrete and steel tube. Above you is millions of gallons of lake water.
Yeah.
And to keep the water from seeping into the mud and collapsing the tunnel, the entire workspace is highly pressurized.
Right.
You have to go through airlocks just to get to the digging face.
And in subterranean construction, especially beneath a lake bed rich in organic material, there's always a looming threat.
Natural gas.
Specifically methane.
And late on the night of July 24th, that is exactly what the crew hits. A massive pocket of gas. Now, methane is incredibly volatile.
Highly explosive.
In the confined, highly pressurized space of a tunnel, any spark, a dropped tool, a spark from the electric tramway, an open flame will trigger an instant catastrophic reaction.
And that is exactly what happened. The gas ignited. A massive explosion ripped through the tunnel beneath the lake.
Oh, man.
The physical concussive force caused cave-ins, warping the steel tracks, destroying the lighting, and trapping dozens of workers deep underground in complete darkness.
But the explosion, as horrific as it was, wasn't even the deadliest part, was it?
No.
The fire consumed the available oxygen, and the tunnel rapidly began filling with toxic, asphyxiating gas. It was a lethal mixture of smoke, dust, and deadly fumes.
The environment inside that tunnel instantly became unsurvivable for unprotected lungs. When a methane explosion occurs in a confined space like that, it produces massive amounts of carbon monoxide.
Let's explain why carbon monoxide is so deadly, especially in a rescue scenario. Because it's not like choking on thick black smoke where you know immediately that you can't breathe, right?
Exactly. Carbon monoxide is often called the silent killer because it is totally colorless and odorless.
You wouldn't even know you're breathing it in.
You wouldn't.
Yeah.
Physiologically, carbon monoxide binds to the hemoglobin in your blood, the proteins responsible for carrying oxygen, but 200 times more aggressively than actual oxygen does.
Oh, wow. 200 times.
Yes.
So even if there is still some oxygen in the tunnel, your body just ignores it and pulls in the poison instead.
Yes. Your blood becomes completely saturated with carbon monoxide. Your brain and your vital organs are starved of oxygen.
That's terrifying.
Victims experience confusion, lethargy, loss of motor control, and eventually unconsciousness and death. And alongside the carbon monoxide, there would have been hydrogen sulfide and thick particulate smoke from burning timber and debris.
Just a nightmare down there.
The trapped men were breathing pure poison.
So the explosion happens. The alarm is raised on the surface. The night shift supervisors realize something catastrophic has occurred beneath the lake.
Panic sets in.
Initial rescue crews are scrambled. These are professional responders, police, firemen, specialized tunnel crews.
But we must emphasize a critical detail here. They were totally unequipped for this specific kind of help.
Right.
They lacked adequate breathing protection. Some had those older, heavy Draeger apparatuses we mentioned earlier, but they were notoriously unreliable and complex to operate in an absolute panic.
And the others?
Others simply try to go down with wet towels.
They attempt to descend into the tunnel, they get in the elevator cages, they go down into the dark, and they march out into the gas to find the survivors.
And they don't come back.
They don't.
The toxic atmosphere was too dense. These initial rescue attempts didn't just fail, they compounded the tragedy. The rescuers themselves were overcome by the carbon monoxide.
God.
They collapsed in the dark and died in the tunnel. Then a second rescue party went down to try and save the first rescue party.
And they didn't make it either.
No, they were overcome as well. The situation was cascading into an absolute nightmare. The air was poison, and anyone who went down that shaft was effectively committing suicide.
The panic on the surface must have been unimaginable. You have men trapped below, you have your best rescuers dying as they try to reach them, the mayor is there, the police chief is there, and they are utterly paralyzed. They have no technology that can handle this environment. But then, in the middle of the night, someone remembers Garrett Morgan.
Yes.
Someone in the crowd or one of the officials remembers the safety hood.
Morgan is awakened by a phone call in the middle of the night, and his response is immediate and unequivocal.
He doesn't hesitate.
He doesn't just send a crate of his devices to the site with an instruction manual. He gathers his brother, Frank, and they load their car with as many safety hoods as they can carry.
The historical accounts note he actually arrived at the waterworks still wearing his pajama bottoms under his clothes.
That's how fast he moved.
Put yourself on the shore of Lake Erie that night. It's chaotic. It's illuminated by searchlights. Women are screaming, knowing their husbands are trapped below.
Yeah.
Rescuers have already gone down into that hole and haven't come back up. Everyone standing on that shore knows the tunnel is a graveyard. And here comes Garrett Morgan,
The inventor himself.
the man who has had to hide his face to sell his invention. But he doesn't hire an actor for this. He doesn't put on a Native American disguise.
No time for that.
He steps up to the shaft. He straps his own invention to his own head. He secures the breathing tubes, making sure the trailing line is ready to drop to the floor to catch the cool air.
He trusts his work.
And he, along with his brother and a few brave volunteers, personally steps into the elevator cage and descends 250 feet into the abyss.
It is an act of extraordinary, almost incomprehensible courage. We must remember that Morgan was not a trained firefighter.
Right.
He was not a sandhog. He is a 39-year-old businessman and inventor. He is volunteering to do what the better-equipped professional rescuers had just died trying to do.
Yeah.
He is trusting the theoretical physics and chemistry of his own design. The convection currents, the wet sponge, the exhaust valve with his own life, in real time, under the most extreme conditions imaginable.
He goes down into the dark. The elevator hits the bottom. They step out into the tunnel. They wade through the debris, the warped steel, the darkness.
Yeah.
And the device works. The wet sponge cools the air. The trailing tube finds the breathable pockets near the floor. It filters the smoke. They push forward and they find bodies. But amidst the bodies, they find survivors.
Alive.
Men who are incapacitated, choking to death, but still alive. And Morgan and his team managed to pull them back to the elevator and bring them to the surface.
And the physical exertion of this cannot be overstated. Dragging grown men through a debris-filled, pitch-black tunnel while breathing through a canvas hood is exhausting.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
But Morgan doesn't just do it once. He catches his breath on the surface, and he goes back down into the nightmare.
Wow.
He makes multiple trips into that gas-filled tunnel.
He went back into the poison over and over again. Now, looking at the historical records, the exact numbers vary slightly depending on which newspaper or report you read.
Sure, things were chaotic.
Yeah, some say he personally saved 2 men. Others say he helped recover a dozen bodies and save several more. But the exact body count isn't the core of the story.
No, it's not.
The undeniable fact is that men were dying, the professional authorities had completely failed, and Morgan went down into a lethal environment and brought people back breathing.
The vindication in that moment is staggering. Think about the symmetry of what just occurred.
Right.
In the middle of an active, highly publicized, chaotic emergency, the safety hood unmistakably proved itself. It proved its efficacy to the very public, the very civic authorities, and the very market that had previously been reluctant to buy it from a black inventor.
The fire chiefs who rejected him could literally watch his invention dragging their men out of the fire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Morgan bypassed the prejudice market by simply demonstrating the undeniable life-saving utility of his device in a crisis.
Out in the open.
He saved lives out in the open. There was no actor. There was no Chief Mason disguise. There was only Garrett Morgan, his intellect, his engineering, and his immense courage.
He pulls off this incredible rescue. The survivors are on the surface, coughing up smoke, but alive. The device is a proven miracle, and you would think, okay, this is it.
The turning point.
This is the turning point. If this were a Hollywood movie, this is where the dramatic music swells. Morgan emerges from the elevator, covered in soot, and the crowd parts.
Right.
The mayor shakes his hand and gives him the key to the city. The national newspapers run his photo, his business booms, he becomes a millionaire overnight, and the racist assumptions of the era are shattered by the sheer power of undeniable competence and heroism.
It is a comforting narrative, isn't it?
We want it to be true so badly.
The idea that ultimate merit, when demonstrated so undeniably, will always shatter prejudice. We desperately want to believe that heroism acts as a cure for societal bigotry. But history is rarely that clean. When we move into the aftermath of the Lake Erie disaster, we confront a clear-eyed, unsentimental historical truth.
Because what happened next is, in its own quiet, bureaucratic way, just as shocking as the racism he faced before the rescue.
It's insidious.
We move into the days and weeks following the explosion, and what we see is a chilling, documented media erasure.
It was an immediate total silence. In the very first hours, some reports mentioned him. But very quickly, historians and biographers have documented a pervasive, deliberate inconsistency in the press coverage.
Right.
As the story was formalized in the major newspapers over the following days, Morgan's specific central role in the rescue was actively downplayed, entirely omitted, or heavily distorted.
Let's talk about how that actually looks in practice, because I don't think it was necessarily a smoke-filled backroom conspiracy where all the newspaper editors in Ohio got together and explicitly said, let's delete Garrett Morgan from history.
No, it's rarely that explicit.
Sometimes prejudice operates much more passively, which makes it even more insidious. How does a city watch a man pull survivors from a poison tunnel, dragging them out of the jaws of death, and then days later just forget his name?
The mechanics of that erasure rely on the deeply ingrained assumptions of the society and the editorial boards. Think about the narrative the newspapers were selling to their readers.
Okay.
The true story: a black inventor outperforming white rescue professionals, saving white workers using his own proprietary technology, and demonstrating vastly superior courage, directly contradicted the foundational racial hierarchy that white society believed in.
It basically broke their brains.
Yeah.
It didn't compute with the worldview they were printing every single day.
Exactly. So the story was subtly massaged to fit a more comfortable narrative. If you read the major Cleveland papers in the days following, the massive headlines praised the mayor for his leadership.
Right.
They praised the police chief. They highlighted the heroism of the white volunteers who eventually joined the recovery effort.
And Morgan.
If Morgan was mentioned at all, he was often relegated to a minor bullet point deep in the article. Some papers merely refer to him vaguely as a colored man who helped,
A colored man who helped.
completely stripping away his identity as the inventor of the very device that made the rescue possible. They sanded down the core truth until his presence in his own story became ghost-like.
It's infuriating. They take his miracle, they take his absolute peak of human bravery, and they strip his name off it.
Yep.
They needed his engineering to save their lives, but they couldn't stomach giving him the historical credit. And the injustice doesn't stop with the newspapers. The sources show a clear continuation of the status quo from official institutions as well.
One of the most glaring examples involves the Carnegie Hero Fund Commission.
Oh man, this part.
This was a prominent, highly respected organization established by Andrew Carnegie specifically to recognize and financially reward outstanding acts of civilian heroism.
And if descending into a gas-filled tunnel multiple times to drag out dying men doesn't qualify for a hero award, literally nothing does.
Precisely. Morgan was nominated for the award by several citizens who had witnessed the event. The commission investigated the Lake Erie rescue. They interviewed survivors and officials.
Okay.
And in the end, they handed out several Carnegie Hero Medals to men involved in the rescue. They gave awards to the white officials, the white rescue workers,
But not Morgan.
but they entirely denied an award to Garrett Morgan.
They gave the medal to the people wearing his invention, but not to him.
The racial bias of the selection committee was undeniable. Despite the sworn testimonies of the men he saved, The official civic bodies refused to grant him the highest tier of recognition.
And what did this do to his business? Because initially he hired the actor to hide his race.
Right.
But now, because of the rescue, his identity was out there. The mask was literally and figuratively off. Did the undeniable proof of the device's success finally break down the commercial barriers?
Tragically, no. In fact, in many ways, the exposure of his true identity triggered a backlash.
You're kidding.
The historical record indicates that once his race became widely known nationally, a significant number of existing orders for the safety hood, particularly from fire departments and mining companies in the American South, were actively canceled.
Are you kidding me? They canceled their orders.
Yes.
They knew it worked. They knew it had just saved lives in Cleveland.
They knew it worked, but their commitment to the racial hierarchy was stronger than their commitment to safety. The same racial grounds that had forced him to use an actor continued to create massive friction.
Unbelievable.
And it wasn't just the safety hood. He continued to encounter this systemic resistance when he later tried to market his other inventions, including the traffic signal.
It is a heavy, heavy realization. We look at Garrett Morgan's life, and we are forced to confront an analytical takeaway that isn't particularly comforting.
No, it's not.
His story proves that even a documented act of immense, undeniable individual excellence performed in public, saving lives, using a device of his own creation was not enough to fully dismantle the structural discrimination he faced.
It forces us to acknowledge a difficult reality about history. Technological progress and social progress do not always move at the same speed.
Right.
Individual excellence, even when it reaches the level of superhuman bravery and genius, cannot single-handedly cure a systemic societal sickness. Morgan was engineering the future. He was building devices that belonged in a modern, safe, rational world.
But he was forced to live in the present?
He was forced to live and sell his products in a deeply flawed, irrational present.
He provided the ultimate, undeniable proof of his worth, and the society essentially said, "Thank you for saving our lives. Now please go back to the margins."
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the historical records, let's bring it all together for you. Let's look at the immense legacy of this incredible mind.
Let's do it.
Garrett Morgan built a physical device, the safety hood, that manipulated convection currents in chemistry to literally allow people to breathe inside poison gas.
A literal lifesaver.
He looked at the lethal chaos of early modern intersections and engineered a three-position traffic signal logic, a mechanical buffer for kinetic energy that still keeps us safe today every single time we drive to the grocery store.
It's incredible.
These are monumental, world-altering achievements.
They are the hallmarks of an elite, visionary engineering mind, a mind that observed the frictions of the world and continually engineered solutions to reduce them.
But the profound tragedy of his life, the part that we have to remember alongside the patents and the incredible rescues, is that he had to build a third thing.
The disguise.
Had to build a disguise, he had to construct a fake persona, hire a stand-in, and erase himself just to be allowed to exist in the marketplace. He had to engineer a way around the racism of his own customers.
And that third invention, the disguise, is the one that tells us the most about the era he lived in.
Yeah.
It reminds us that history is not always a neat upward arc toward justice. We like to think that a good idea will simply win out because it is good. We believe in meritocracy.
We want to believe in it.
But sometimes, the person doing the saving, the person with the critical answers, has already had to prove over and over again that they deserve to be believed at all. And as Morgan's life shows us in stark detail, even undeniable heroism doesn't always finish the argument.
It's a deeply sobering thought. The man standing in the wrong costume in that smoke-filled tent wasn't just executing a clever marketing trick. He was holding a mirror up to a profoundly broken society.
And it leaves us with a critical, lingering question to consider.
What's that?
Think about the sheer statistical improbability of Garrett Morgan succeeding as much as he did despite the barriers. And then consider this: if an invention as urgent and universally necessary as a gas mask, a device that literally separates human life from death, was subjected to this massive level of societal friction simply because of the race of its creator. What other world-changing innovations throughout history were entirely suffocated? What other brilliant ideas, cures, machines, philosophies were abandoned or lost entirely before they ever reached the market, simply because the inventor couldn't find a disguise good enough to get them through the door?